Yes, ma'am, you can start the session.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, ma'am, you can start the session.
Oh, hello. Hi. So, my name is Dr. Liliya, and I am a psychiatrist who is autistic and diagnosed with ADHD as well. In addition to that, I am a mother of two children who are on the spectrum, both have ADHD, and my husband also is ADHD autistic. So we have a neurodivergent family. And when I first was aware of autism um, as a concept, I had no idea that something like that could be uh, in my family. That I myself could be one of the people who are described as autistic, although I have always been described as weird. I have always felt uh, different. I have always looked on the world from outside in and never felt like I belonged anywhere. I always felt that I was uh, a stranger in a strange land, I guess, like Robert Heinlein, uh, like the one of the books that Robert Heinlein wrote. But it really came home to me when I noticed there were some differences in the behavior that my son, or that our son, um, was was described as struggling with at school. So that was back in early 2000s, so 2003, 2005, and I did not realize at the time uh, that he could be on the spectrum. Again, I thought it might be ADHD, just because I was familiar with the condition, but autism in somebody with without learning disability, without intellectual disability, was still a very uncommon phenomenon that I hadn't come across at the time. And to cut the long story short, after struggling at school with fairly innocuous behaviors like mm, not wanting to listen to the teacher when the teacher would say that we need to stop dancing now, we need to start writing the letters in the sand. So, you know, that at the age of 3, 4 years old, my son was finally um, diagnosed with the condition in 2009, when shortly after that, um, we realized that our younger child, who was born the same year, uh, was also on the spectrum, and finally having problems, having had problems uh, with my supervisors, my line managers, my entire life. In 2016, I was diagnosed as on the spectrum. I was diagnosed autistic and ADHD in the same year, and I have had significant difficulties with my uh, employer after blowing the whistle twice, developed severe depression and went off of sick. And for a considerable time, I struggled with my identity. I couldn't understand how I could be autistic, how anybody could not see that, how I was supposed to see myself now, because to me it was something so profoundly different and so unusual that I was upset with the world. I was upset with myself. I was upset with people around me for not realizing that, considering that I was working among other psychiatrists, not only just any psychiatrist, but psychiatrists who were actually supposed to have been specialized in neurodevelopmental conditions. And then because I suddenly had so much time to myself, to learn about the condition, to read and research, I started doing just that. And I started going online. I started being active on various groups in Facebook. And actually, it was one of the groups on Facebook that gave me the impetus, gave me the idea of the training that I have launched recently that I wanted to talk to you about today. It was a mother of a 9-year-old girl that was severely upset and was very emotional, talking in a group about her child and her mother-in-law, and the complete breakdown in the relationships in the family, how nobody could understand the child and the child anxiety, how the family was accused of not just being overly indulgent and not being sufficiently disciplinary with the child, and how the child was controlling the family, how they were all soft on the child, etc. At the same time, the child struggled with enormous anxiety, and it all kind of came to a head when she requested not to have a birthday party. But the grandmother of the child, so the mother-in-law of the woman who posted, went ahead and threw a birthday party, a surprise birthday party for the girl. And when on the day in question, the family visited the grandmother, the girl was unable to contain her anxiety and went into the autistic meltdown, which the grandmother took very personally and interpreted it as a temper tantrum and not autistic meltdown, and was very upset that the child was ungrateful. The parents were very upset that the grandmother didn't listen and refused to basically acknowledge the child's need for routine and predictability. And at the time of the discussion taking place in a Facebook group, it was 6 months later. The family was still not talking to each other. So there was a complete relationship breakdown between the grandmother and the girl, and the grandmother and the girl's parents. And that mother really struggled with the concept of how do you explain something like this? How do you explain why the child was unable to tolerate the birthday party? And this is when I first voiced my understanding of autism, beyond the clinical environment, beyond the sort of family or friend circle, and said, just checking, but do I understand correctly that the girl really needed the predictability and really didn't want surprises because that was important for her to contain her anxiety, which the grandmother did not understand. And this, from her point of view, there was lack of gratitude despite the grandmother going out and spending money and putting so much effort and um, time into organization of the party. And this is when the mother said, yes, that's exactly it. But do you know of any resource that could be used just to give it to the grandmother so we can give it to her to read, not a 5 pounds volume of Atwood's manual on Asperger's, but just something that could explain a situation succinctly and to the point, just to give you this basic understanding of the issue. And I didn't, at the time, that was 2019, at the time, the only widely available resource was The Girl with Curly Hair, and they were charging ridiculous sum of money, like 45 British pounds for a poster on the wall about, the frequent causes of meltdown or something like that. So there were no resources I could find, even after looking for it. And the resources that were out there were not something that you could use to really understand autism instead of just knowing about autism. And this is my main complaint with regards to everything that is out there in terms of autism training or neurodiversity training. It's all either vastly academic and talking about autism, or it's going into such a unnecessary detail and of neuroscience and detail of uh, research, biology, neurophysiology, that is neither accessible to an average reader, nor it's really appropriate. So within a few months, I came up with the idea for my training, which is the mnemonic for it, the acronym for it is Autistic. So Autistic from First Principles. Um, as you know, First Principles is a series of sort of the basic concepts you can use to understand some kind of any kind of complex concept. And I have always tried to understand things from the very basic concept, which is, I think I was a perfect person to get thinking about this kind of understanding for neurodiversity. So autistic from First Principles is the acronym for 8 first principles, or 8 basic concepts, which if you get a good understanding of them, if you get a detailed understanding of these 8 principles, you can learn to apply them to understand any concept, any situation, any kind of scenario, no matter how alien it looks, how strange it looks, and any kind of behavior that an autistic adult or child presents with. You can understand meltdowns, you can understand anxiety, you can understand the sensory issues, you can understand why the person may have a strange emotional effect on you. So it's all going down to these 8 basic principles or first principles. I had been polishing this concept for the last 4 years, and finally this year I launched it with online events, which is the platform for CPD approved training for mental health care professionals that is based here in the UK, but you can become a member of the platform from anywhere and have access to the back library or to join the events live. And we're just about to finish. We're just about to have the last final session of this year's run. And later this year, in December, we're going to launch the online version of the training. So just to run through the 8 principles to give you an understanding what the 8 principles are. The first one is, if you think autistic, the word autistic, so AUTISTIC. The first letter A is for anxiety. The first module is therefore, we're talking about autistic anxiety, which is a huge problem. It's the ratio of autistic people suffering from clinically diagnosable anxiety disorders is flipped compared to neurotypical ones. If we say that in general population, about 10 to 12% of people suffer with anxiety, in autistic people, this ratio is flipped, so up to 90%. You know, the most conservative estimate, about 20%, but there are some data suggest that up to 90%, and that's 90% of autistic people suffer with clinically diagnosable anxiety disorder. And autistic anxiety has 3 specific drivers that can distinguish it from neurotypical anxiety. And if you're familiar with those drivers, if you know what they are, first, it becomes much easier to understand what kind of situations are going to be anxiety provoking for an autistic person. Second, it becomes much easier to empathize with that anxiety and therefore to treat autistic person with more understanding and with more kindness and empathy. And third, most importantly, you can potentially prevent these anxiety-provoking episodes and the ultimate of the anxiety, the autistic meltdown. And these 3 principles are what we talk about for the duration of the first module, and it's not complicated. Again, everything about this training, it's not complicated. It's just the issue of knowing about it and talking about it and learning to apply it. You probably will be able to give me examples of it if I were to ask you for feedback now, but you know, for autistic anxiety, the examples would be issues like the top 3 drivers would be like weak central coherence, or now, as we tend to say, it's the detail-oriented thinking style or detail-oriented cognitive bias, or you know, not seeing the forest behind the trees. This is basically the concept. The second one is the interoceptive sensibility, or differences in how we perceive the signals from our internal organs like heart and lungs and our gut. The way we perceive those signals can be substantially different from the way that neurotypical people perceive those. And the third one is the intolerance of uncertainty. That's the most significant one. And this is the one that you can potentially have the most influence on in terms of preventing um, diagnosable anxiety disorders, or at least preventing the autistic meltdowns. And then based on those three top drivers, we talk about how the autistic anxiety can be diagnosed, how we display our anxiety, what our anxious behavior, and finally, what kind of preventative steps can be taken, and how we can minimize the impact of the anxiety. So this is the whole first module, the drivers, how we know that we are anxious, so the symptoms and signs, and prevention and treatment. So this is number one. The second module is letter U. It's uneven. We're talking about everything uneven in autism. And there are a lot of uneven aspects to our life. So first of all, we talk about the uneven aspects of our performance, how we can be performing great one day and terribly the next day, how uneven can be our sensory experience. One day we can cope fine with the same intensity of the sensory experience. The next day we will not be able to tolerate it without going into a meltdown. How uneven our intellectual profile is, cognitive profile, IQ testing, how scattered the processing speed and working memory is from the verbal and non-verbal IQ, and how it all, in everything, in every aspect of unevenness, every time we come back to how it shows, how it affects our daily life. That's the most important thing that we are talking about. And the second part of the uneven discussion is what I tend to call the 6 ages of the autistic person. So that's a concept, the fact that we can be said to be of 6 different ages. So our biological age can be radically different from our social age, our emotional age, our chronological age, and our intellectual age. To give you an example, if we talk about a child, we have a boy that chronologically can be 10 years old. Biologically, they may already be going through the puberty, if not have gone through puberty, because premature puberty can be a problem with raised prevalence in autistic people. So, his biological age can be, say, 14. His intellectual age can be, 20. He can be a genius doing college level stuff. But then if we talk about his social skills and his emotional age, his social age may be 3, 4 years of age, and his emotional skills can be those of a 5 to 6-year-old. And again, the emphasis, it's very practical emphasis of the entire course. So the emphasis here is we need to approach the person on a level that they are functioning in that particular domain. So what if his intellectual age is 20? if we talk about a difficulty he has socializing with other people or understanding social behavior, that needs to be approached on the level of his development. So we need to talk to him as if he were actually, 3-4 years old, because that's the level of his understanding. And equally, it doesn't matter that he is socially at the age of, the first grader. It should not stop him from exercising his intellectual abilities at his level, whatever it is appropriate. So it can be very disorienting for the carers, can be very confusing for the teachers, but if you are truly child focused, if you're truly person focused, it's really quite essential when you're working with autistic people to address each facet of our ability profile on the appropriate level. Then the third module is key, and it's about time blindness. Time blindness is a huge issue for autistic people. I don't know why. Right now, everybody's talking about time blindness for ADHD. Virtually nobody is talking about it in autism, and it's a huge issue in autism. And we talk how it shows, why it is unavoidable, a degree of it, uh, and how you can manage it sort of on a practical level. Again, everything goes back to the practical details. What do we do about it? Then the next I is about intelligence, and we talk about the huge spread of intelligence from intellectual disability to the literally genius, and what kind of problems does an autistic person face depending where they are on the intelligence spectrum, how autism can show itself depending on the cognitive profile, on the intellectual profile of the person. Then we're talking after I, it's S. So the next module is on sensitivity. And we're talking about emotional sensitivity, cognitive sensitivity, sensory sensitivity, the interpersonal sensitivity, the intensity that we come across at, which we again going back to in the I module, or module number 7, which is autistic is intense. So autistic is intense. There we're talking about intensity. Again, we're intense at the cognitive level, at the interpersonal level, attentional level, emotional level. The point of the course is we constantly go back and forth. So we are talking about the issue in autistic anxiety, which is module 1, but we touch upon issues that we cover later practically in each module. And then when we talk about the issues in the next module, we go back and reflect on the issues that we discussed in modules before then. So in this way, the module number 7, or autistic is intense, links back to module number 6, autistic is sensitive, module number 1, autistic is anxious, module number 2, autistic is uneven, etc. And because of these constant cross references, it really gets into your long-term memory, into your memory storage for the long-term thinking, for your ability to apply the knowledge. And in the case discussions, in the exercises, we further cement this ability. So by the time you complete the training, you are more or less confident to apply it in your own life. And just to quickly say that module number 6. So that's the second T, is autistic is thinking. And thinking, it's about autistic styles of thinking, inductive versus deductive, bottom up versus top down. The again, we touch on coherence here, weak central coherence or detail-based, detail-biased cognitive style. And then module number 8 is autistic is coherent, which is entirely dedicated to all the beautiful complexity and detail of weak central coherence and executive functions. So this is the module that we talk most about the executive functions here, and then the autistic is thinking, so 2 modules, and also about the weak central coherence, what advantages it brings, as well as the disadvantages, and how you need to structure the young person's education, or or an older person's education. And if you're talking about mature students or continuing professional development, how you can structure the person's life to adapt best to their thinking style and learning style and natural level of functioning. So this is the outline of autistic. And I think if you are interested, um, we can talk in the next session. We can talk more about the autistic is anxious, and discuss the module 1 in more detail. But as I said, we also are going to be launching the online version of the training later this year, and obviously you are welcome to join that as well. So that's me. I'm happy to answer any questions if you want, if you have any questions. Hello? Hello? Well, I don't know what's happening, but it looks like we are. I'm not sure if I'm talking to somebody or if I'm just talking to myself, but I guess I can continue talking for now. Um, Well, you can, in case you want to reach out to me after the event, you're welcome to do so either via my website, which is www.autismdoctor.org, or you can go to LinkedIn, and it's Dr. Liliya Wheatcraft on LinkedIn. Can you share about details for 4.5-year-old child who is having autism, especially hyperactive behavioral issues and speech delay? How we deal and handle this type and age of child? I um I cannot really say about any specific. This is so this is not a clinical consultation. This is therefore I cannot give you, prescriptive um, recommendations for actions other than um, to reiterate that every child is very different in a developmental pattern. What I would be very hesitant to do is to uh, put this child in a particular box right now and give him any sort of long-term predictions. What I would say is a couple of things that you need to keep in mind. First of all, 4.5-year-old child is very young, and I don't know. Again, I don't know what kind of behavioral issues. The behavioral issue. My son was described as having behavioral issues because he didn't want to sit down and was preferred to dance rather than write things in the sand. So that's a behavioral issues. On the other hand, biting and kicking other children because sharing the toys or not sharing the toys is also behavioral issues. So I cannot know what kind of behavioral issues we are talking about, but um, I would say at 4.5 years old, you need to be very, very flexible in terms of what you expect from the child and what you should be um, working on with the child. In general, when it comes to young autistic children, and actually autistic children of any age, what I think is important is to remember that you need to put all these developmental, maps and charts just out of your mind. You need to get to your child's level and build them up from that level onwards. They will, because their brain is very different. You cannot expect them to develop in a typical pattern. What I often see in clinical practice is things like the child doesn't learn something for a long time, and people can stress about it, people can give up, or people can simply gently persevere and encourage them. And this is the most successful way of gently persevering and encouraging them on to achieving something. You can't push it, because if you push it, you just create resistance. If you push it and stress it, you create anxiety, and that will inhibit the development. You can just, the best way is to treat it as a game. And I know it's very hard. I know it's very hard when you're very anxious about the child's future. I know it's very hard when you don't know what the heck is going to be happening, and when you're worried about it. But just think about that. Your stressing about it is not going to help anything. You're not stressing about it is going to remove that anxiety from your child's shoulders. Because I'm sorry, but we are a bit like dogs. We're a bit like animals. Uh, when you're on the spectrum, you're extremely sensitive to other people's emotions. You may not understand what emotion it is, but you know that something is wrong. And I remember feeling my parents' emotions since I remember myself. And I remember myself. My first memory is when I was about 6 months of age. I still I still had a grandmother who passed when I was 11 months. So, and I always had this perception of my parents' anxiety, my parents' anger, and the negative emotions that they experience. So you cannot stress them, you cannot push them. You can only get an infinite supply of patience and try to encourage them. Um, and for a long time, they may not get it. By it, I mean a skill. And then suddenly in one day, they just go from zero to hero, like I say. That's a very specific pattern typical for autistic children. When they can't learn to swim, they can't learn to swim. It's been 6 months, they haven't been able to learn to paddle. And then suddenly something shifts in their brain. And literally the next day, they're doing the butterfly stroke. I'm not kidding. I have observed it. I learned to ride a bike like this. I couldn't learn. I couldn't learn. And then suddenly it just something shifted and I was riding a bike. Uh, people learn languages like this. People get uh, some particular school subjects like this. It can go on in any different domain, in any different skill. It can be true for getting dressed. It can be true for speech development. It can be true for um, self-care, anything. So just persevere, but don't make a big deal about it. Now, I noticed that it says here, behavior like not command following eye contact. These are not behavioral issues. These are just they developing on a different schedule. It's the pediatricians and sort of professionals who haven't had an opportunity to learn enough about the complexities of autistic development. They can label it as a behavioral issue. It's not a behavioral issue. To me, a behavioral issue is something, it's much more intentional. Like, refusing to draw with because you want to dance. That's a behavioral issue. This is just a symptom of a sign of autism, not following command and eye contact. Well, first of all, eye contact can be very uncomfortable for an autistic person. I'm sure you have noticed I have done most of this talk by actually even now as I'm talking about it, I'm looking somewhere away from the camera. It different people describe it differently. For me, I can I cannot think through my answer or think through what I want to say when I look at the person. I can maintain eye contact when I listen, but not when I speak. When I speak, I need to look somewhere where the person isn't. So eye contact, and didn't stop me from getting through medical school and doing this right now, and having a degree from several universities, including Cambridge and studying at Oxford. So eye contact is not the end of it all. Don't stress about eye contact. Command following, that's different. Again, you need to, first of all, the basics, make sure that the hearing is unaffected, that, and you know, there could be other issues like, have they had it? It's possible because we have different pain threshold. Some of us are more sensitive to pain. Some of us are less sensitive to pain. You need to make sure that the child didn't have something like middle ear infection and pop their eardrum, so they may not have hearing, or their hearing may be compromised. You need to consider that. You need to consider that issues like tuberous sclerosis or neurofibromatosis, you know, issues that have nothing to do with autism, and actually autism is secondary to these conditions. You need to investigate the hearing from every possible angle. And only when you are convinced that the hearing is absolutely fine, then you go in, okay, so why they're not following command? Are they not following command only sometimes or all the time? Do they, if it's all the time, well, if it's sometimes, it's obvious, you know, they choose what to follow commands. That's different. That's actually pretty good. That means that they're engaging from the, it might not be good from the, you know, naughty child kind of angle, but it's good because that means that the social development is more complex than you might think right now. But if they're not following commands because, you know, consistently at any level, anybody, why is that? Do they understand what social interaction is like? Is it worth their while to follow the command? Try to make it worth their while to follow a command and see if they follow it then. Make it engaging. Make it enjoyable. And then there are some things in which no matter how much you want them to follow commands in a particular way, they won't be able to. For example, there is the thing called autistic inertia, or also called context switching issue or the transition issue. So, you know, you can stand there and scream and go blue in face and demand that they stop doing this and move on to this. And they physically are not capable of doing it because they need a certain transition period. They can't just switch like you and I can. They need a fairly individual transition period where you need to introduce the idea to them, you need to make them interested in the idea, and you need to make it engaging enough for them to follow it. Maybe they are not following commands because they're just so overwhelmed and they're in a shutdown. So that's a quiet version of the meltdown. There are so many potential issues. It's very difficult to tell you, well, it's impossible to tell you what to do. But I think my role here is just to present you with the overwhelming number of issues that need to be considered before you can start addressing anything related like this scenario. He keeps on jumping and making sound like, okay. So it sounds like he's stimming. Again, stimming can have stimming or sort of perseveratory behavior has a lot of different functions. One of the functions is regulating anxiety. That's the first thing you need to think about, because if he is anxious, he's not going to engage with anything. Therefore, you need to observe what kind of scenarios does he tend to become like this? Does he tend to steam more? And your role is kind of a detective now. You need to detect what kind of external situation correspond to what kind of changes in his behavior. And you have to be very observant on his behalf. And then you need to start making very small changes and observe the effect. And this is, I'm afraid, this is kind of the daily life of raising an autistic child. You need to be absolutely sure what the problem actually is, and then you need to start making solutions. Unless you are absolutely sure, you try and make them sort of gradually in small steps, so that the problem does not, so that the solution does not become a problem in itself, again, because of the transition difficulties. I hope that makes sense. Yes, so our Zoom meeting expires, so requesting to end the session. Yes, of course. Anyway, it was a pleasure to be here with you guys, and I will hopefully look forward to seeing you again and talking to you about autistic anxiety in the next session. Thank you very much. And I am signing out. Have a good day.